5's in the books. It was a pretty good week for some of us and not for others. Most of our teams suck except for...
What do you mean? Me and Treb's teams are all
133 points worth awesome.
Who's that, me?
I think so.
I think I got 155.
Oh, I could be wrong.
Plus, I have the hardest schedule in the league. Come on.
wrong.
I've played Dane.
You do not have the hardest schedule.
Yes, I do. I've played.
Your schedule is as hard as the Cowboys' schedule.
How many weeks in a row? How many weeks in a row are we going to make the same joke?
Hot take Andrew Trevin coming in hot.
If I hadn't heard that joke like 3 times already, I would. I've played Dane, I've played Shane, I've played Treb, and I've played Betancourt. Those are the 4 best teams in the league, other than myself.
Yeah, it's pretty tough schedule to start. It's kind of like the Cowboys. Thursday night game, best Thursday night game we've had yet.
Yeah, Rams Seahawks.
Yeah, Rams 29, Seahawks 30. This felt like a playoff game.
Yeah, it really seemed like both teams were finally clicking on all cylinders, bringing what they want. I mean, Russell Wilson, I think everyone said it after the game, it was one of the best games he's ever played. It was really impressive.
Lights out. He had 17 for 23, 268 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions.
Every year, I think he's like now the third, either the third rated quarterback, or in some formats he's the number 1 quarterback.
Yeah, in drafting he was going 5th to 10th, anywhere.
And later, yeah.
People were taking so many quarterbacks that you'd look at least and you go, you're not going to be starting your first draft pick. You'll be starting Russell Wilson, kind of thing.
I just don't know what to make of this Rams defense now moving forward in all formats.
They stink. That's what I make of it. They're so off kilter.
But in most formats, outside of Dynasty, of course, they were ranked the second ranked defense amongst everybody out there. And here you are giving up 55 points to Tampa Bay and then 30 points essentially to Seattle.
And they lost Clay
weeks.
They lost Clay for an extended period of time.
And they lost Clay. And then it's just you have these game makers there. Where's Eric Weddle? Where Aaron Donald's always consistently showing up. I mean, yes, they lost Ndamukong Suh, but I don't think that would have made such a major impact on that defense that it has. What's been the difference? Dante Fowler probably isn't as performing as much either this year.
Fowler's Aaron Donald's the one where I actually question whether he's showing up all the time. You say that because we make this assumption that he's so good. He tends to have games where he blows up, but he has games where he tends to disappear. He's had 2 games this season where he's had 1 or no tackles. That's pretty crazy. Dante Fowler's actually been more consistent than him.
Fowler's been amazing. Donald, I'm on board with you.
Yeah.
He's been a huge letdown so far.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I get the excuse you get this with a lot of defensive players where, they're getting double teamed, they're getting triple teamed, and I understand that. But if you're the best defensive player in the league, the point of view is that you can split double teams and you can still wreak havoc, and it's just not as a consistent basis as it has been in the past. Their pass rush will take a massive hit with Clay. Dante Fowler, who was their main pass rush, is now going to get a little bit more chips on the outside.
It's hard to look past 55 points.
Yeah,
that's a lot of points.
Mm-hmm. And their middle is a lot weaker. You look 3 years ago, who was the guy they lost to the Giants, the middle linebacker?
Barron?
No, Barron they lost last year. So every year they've had a good starting middle linebacker, and they've kind of lost that guy. And now it's Littleton, and he's okay, but it's just one of those things where I think they're soft in the middle. Their secondary is okay. Those guys are getting a little old. Without Sue, they're front, but I think the linebacking core is where they're really struggling.
I think Goff is a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. After he got paid, you would have thought he would have.
Well, I look at the opportunities that he's getting, and he's not making the most of them. Like, if somebody came out of that game and was like, man, he had 395 yards throwing, you'd be like, that's awesome.
Yeah. But
when you go 29 for 49, and it looks like he's close to 50% completion percentage on multiple games, it doesn't look good.
Yeah, and there's a couple of deep throws in there where if you take them out, I know, and you can't do that, but just in general, he hits Cooks or Woods a couple times deep in each game. If you take those away, his stat line becomes non-existent.
Oh, Cooper Kupp's been the huge beneficiary. He's been
for sure
killing it.
I think the interesting development in the last 2 weeks of that Rams offense is Gerald Everett finally emerging a little bit from a tight end.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of it had to do with Cooks going down with an injury. I think they kind of ended up pulling him in and doing a little bit more. But yeah, it's really interesting that the tight end, for such a passing offense, the tight end for the past year and a half has not been involved at all. And for him to finally come in and have a huge game like that is pretty interesting.
I would wait to see if that's a more consistent thing. Their offense, those patterns that you typically see out of tight ends is where Cooper Kupp lives. So that's who's getting all those patterns. So I don't know if they could both sustain that level of 7 receptions for Everett and 9 for Kupp. I don't see that happening every week. But yeah, I mean, that'd be great. But I do think it errs on the side of what is Goff capable of week to week. I think Gurley, you see it. If they're in a game where they're playing a good team and they think they need to win, Gurley will get more touches. If they're playing a team they assume they can beat and know they should beat, they will pull Gurley back and go, this is the game where we will spell him. It's a really interesting thing. You've never really seen it, but they're playing him in games where they feel like they need him, which I think is a really smart thing, but it sucks for fantasy because you want him in against those really crappy teams to get a ton. And you're playing a good Seattle defense, so he's having a good game, but he's not getting the yardage.
He was in a lot too.
Yeah.
He was in for like almost the entire
Because
game.
I think they feel like they need him, especially when Goff struggles.
Next game we have Jaguars 27, Panthers 34. You have Christian McCaffrey, a much better young player than Jared Goff is showing right now.
McCaffrey is what Gurley was the last 2 years for a team.
Just
He's 95% of their offense right now.
He is that offense.
It's awesome if you have him. I played against him this week. It wasn't so fun. I feel worse for people with when going into the season. We thought that Panthers team should be good. There's a lot of pieces there I like. People had DJ Moore. I love DJ Moore. Go Terrapins. There are other receivers. Greg Olsen.
Everybody knew he was getting drafted low, but everyone knew he was going to come in and get the ball.
Curtis Samuel was a popular sleeper, like a good number 2. They just don't produce that much because McCaffrey's getting the ball
all the time.
All the time.
I also think it's partially due to the quarterback. Oh, yeah. And this is even before Kyle Allen came in. Cam was not getting the ball around much as we wanted from somebody who we knew how capable was. But I think Curtis Samuel's kind of flash in the panty for me, even though a lot of people were hyping him up before the season began. DJ Moore, I'm on board with. I like him. The opportunity is always going to exist with DJ Moore. I
think he's one of those young receivers where the more opportunities they give him, he'll do well, but they got to give him the opportunities. It reminds me of, like we just passed the Seahawks game, DK. Like, they only give him so many, and he always overperforms with the opportunities they give him. They just don't give him the ball enough. But yeah, it's tough. They either design a play for Christian McCaffrey or they check down to Christian McCaffrey from the design play. So it seems like it's a Christian McCaffrey show all the time.
His targets are just – it's out of control how often he gets the ball.
On the other side of the ball, we have the Jaguars. Gardner Minshew.
Dude, the most impressive thing to me on the Jaguars, and this is like just so impressive, is the emergence of DJ Chark. He was a first-round pick. He was super...
Second-round pick.
Second. He was super, kind of, I don't think this is a hit. And now all of a sudden out of nowhere.
He's gaining confidence. Like
He's exactly what they want him to be. He's got great hands, great body control. It's really impressive. And he's their best receiver by far.
Yeah, I mean, going into the season, the main thing that I was saying was that the Jaguars were going to have that one receiver that's going to stick out, and it was Marquise Lee. It was DJ Chark. It was D.D. Westbrook. It was,
Connolly maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there was a list of guys, and we didn't know which one it was going to be, and Chark is that guy, and he's reaping the rewards. And it helps that it's not Foles that's throwing into it, because I think Minshew's putting up better stats than Foles would have at this point. Oh, yeah. And Minshew seems to be locked into Chark.
It seems really good for the Jaguars. I know it stinks, but they're not playing up to their potential. But now you're looking at, you're going, oh man, do we have a rookie quarterback, Leonard Fournette, and DJ Chark? Like, that's a nice trio going forward.
And Dede.
And Dede, yeah. Oh yeah, your receiving core now, like with that definitive, if he is a definitive one going forward, your receiving core looks a whole hell of a lot better. Yeah. And Fournette has been much better the last couple of games.
That's the thing he's been quietly doing is he's on the field, he looks healthy. He had a touchdown, I think 27 carries. I mean, he's the bell cow there.
Minshew's mobility is really opening a lot of running lanes for Leonard Fournette that hasn't been there with Blake Bortles there previously, Nick Foles when he was the quarterback and stuff. I think Leonard has a lot more confidence. He could technically be a sell high candidate too if you still worry about the injury history with him too, potentially.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point is with those other quarterbacks, teams were just like stacking the box. And Minshew's the first guy in those three quarterbacks where you've really got
Minshew.
I said it right that time. He's the first guy in a while where teams have had to go, we got to back off a little, So, yeah, huge plus there.
Dwight Goodman from Dodgeball.
Next game, we had the shitter of the week. It was the Cardinals 26, Bengals 23.
Yo, the Bengals are a bad football team.
Yeah.
This was miserable. I tried watching some. I could not get into it.
The Bengals, it's one of those tough ones where you go first year head coach. Like, how much time do you get? They're so bad. Like, you shouldn't be. This is similar to a couple other teams that we'll get to. It was funny that first week for the Bengals where we were like, oh, they looked a lot better than we thought they would look. That seems so far away. That was easily the best they've shown. They just look bad at every level.
And this was against the Cardinals.
Yeah. Everyone was saying it was like 1 win, 2 win, 3 win. I mean, one of the bottom teams, and the Cardinals beat them up. By the way, it's very hard to watch football in Europe. I'm just saying, because I'm going through these games and I saw the scores, but there was no way I could watch any of these games.
Is Tyler Boyd the only like silver lining in that Bengals offense?
14 targets. So Tyler Boyd looked good, but everything else not good.
I mean, Mixon finally got the lion's share of the work that you want him to get. He just didn't get in the end zone. 19 carries for 93 yards is good. You need a touchdown. Yeah. So I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. I mean, no one really has Dalton. Dalton's line isn't bad. They just find a way to lose. That's on the fantasy front. You could have started any one of those three guys. In the reality front, they're just not good.
They've been rotating tackles essentially for the last 3 years. There's no continuity or consistency. When they traded Cordy Glenn to move up 12 spots in the draft, I think it was either last year or the year before, it really wasn't the right move overall.
And they got old really fast on defense, where it's one of those things where there's no real, like, who's good on that defense? Like Carlos Dunlap, like that's great, and Geno Atkins,
Sam Hubbard.
But they got old really fast, and they have some good younger players, but there's no.
Yeah,
you kind of want those pillars at all three tiers
there's
to
no
hang your hat.
On the team.
And like you have Geno Atkins, but what are you at linebacker? What are you at in the secondary? So there's not a whole lot there. The Cardinals, it's the same of what we've seen from the Cardinals. They just got to win this time. Kyler Murray. He looks less than impressive to me, but he looks better each week. This game, he actually had a running game.
Fantasy performance, 93 rushing yards.
Yeah, so that's where you get it.
10 carries and a touchdown. Yeah.
But overall, I still don't know what you're going to get at him. If he carries the ball 10 times a game and rushes for 93 yards, he won't make it a full season, I guarantee it.
This is how you know a game was bad, when we're struggling to want to talk about this game right now. So we'll move along. We'll move along to probably the highlight of the week. Texans 53, Atlanta 32.
That's a lot of points. This was the classic Will Fuller game where
he was on my bench.
Of course he was, because you can't start him. He'll score 8 points, 7 points. He'll score 12 points and get injured, and he'll be out for 4 weeks. And then he'll throw up 47 points. This is how Will Fuller performs. At the end of the season, his stats always look pretty good, but he's just wildly inconsistent to the point that it's really hard to know when to play him. And I mean, going into this game, the Falcons defense, I guess, kind of sucks, but I wasn't expecting
that
this.
Bad. Yeah. This is one of the problems I've had in general with the Texans offense going on, I don't know, 10 years, is they're always contingent. Each game seems like a one player. Because that was the thing, is you say that about Will Fuller, and you're right. The problem is, if it's not Will Fuller, it's DeAndre Hopkins. And then pass, it was Arian Foster or,
Dude, he had 217 yards and three touchdowns
on 14 receptions. Yeah, it's a crazy stat line. It's like, you got to let's spread the ball around. Let's get a more uniform game plan. Like, what is the game plan there? But yeah, the Atlanta's, last year their defense was so bad, and they had, 6 starters injured? This year, where's the excuse? They are terrible.
And they're playing from behind. Once again, I'm still excited about any offensive Atlanta Falcons players, because they're going to be behind going. Their opportunities to score are going to exist more just because of this. Matt Ryan, he looked good.
He looks good.
He looked good.
He looks a little older. His throws aren't as quick. They're not as precise.
By the way, back real quick to Deshaun Watson. His stat line was 28 for 33, 426 yards and 5 touchdowns.
It's pretty good.
That is insane.
And no interceptions.
0 interceptions. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
And he ran for another 40 yards too.
Another part to take away from Houston off of this was their run game. It's still pretty much non-existent, even though they're jamming it high. 21 rushes, 60 yards, 1 touchdown. I'm starting to not want any part of that.
It feels like they're just making sure the other team stays honest, because they're going to throw the ball, and they want to make sure that they're not dropping back into nickel.
But they have Carlos Hyde as their.
They're just going to keep jamming it to make sure you keep guys on the front.
Has Tunsil made the impact that they thought they were getting when they acquired
paid for him,
and what they paid, the 2 first rounders, and on top of that,
it's going to be hard to live up to that trade. And you're 3-2, leading, tied for the division lead. That'll be something you got to wait till the end of the year. There's no way on game 5 you're going to be like, is this offensive tackle making a big enough impact? It's just, you're not going to know.
I mean, you're not going to know, but I think for what the early dividends are, Deshaun Watson's still getting sacked at a higher clip rate than what the people are a lot. But
it's a lot less than last year.
He's still also getting adjusted to the system. It takes time for coming into a team mid-season.
And look at this stat. I mean, you like Trev just said, 28 to 33, and yeah, he's getting hit. But last year he could never have even had that stat line because he was getting hit so much. Like it was egregious. So. It's a tackle. You'll know by the end of the season if he stays healthy, if he gets acclimated to the system, if he keeps doing what he's doing, and they do get, stat lines like this, and they make the playoffs. Then he was worth it. But that was a lot to give up for those two players.
Are you thinking about putting Will Fuller on the trade block?
No.
After this game, no.
No.
Are you ever going to start him?
Yeah, he's in my starting lineup this week actually.
And he'll put up 7 points.
What I'm going to do now is every receiver that had a good game the week before, I'm just going to
touchdown
injured.
I just hope eventually somebody does well.
We had Bucks 24, Saints 31. The Bucks are more than we're giving them credit for weeks now. And I'm not talking Jameis Winston. I'm talking Chris Godwin.
Yeah. This kills me because
Evans. Also
Evans had nothing. He had 0 points, 0 receptions. I don't get how they scored 24 points, went toe-to-toe with New Orleans, and Evans had nothing.
Double covered.
It shouldn't be enough for Mike. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like you said, Godwin had the game. I don't know how you don't get Evans involved at all.
I mean, he was getting double covered a decent amount. Mm-hmm. I am really regretting the trade that I made to Andrew Trebbing.
I'm happy with it. Yeah, I'm happy with it.
It's a bad trade. In hindsight, you have hindsight.
I mean, I didn't think their passing game would be as good as it was last year. It seems to be doing okay. But it's still, I think the jury's still out. It's it's odd because it's either Evans or it's Godwin in all these games. There hasn't been a game where they both kind of explode from what I can see.
Jameis isn't good enough to get everyone involved. His stat lines, he's 50% completion for 200 yards. There's not enough there for two guys, it seems like.
And if he was a good passer, then there would be more tight end action going on too.
Yeah, and the other takeaway again is O.J. Howard is just
non-existent.
Yeah, there's room for 2 receivers on that team, and that's Godwin and Evans, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like Brait sees the field more than he does, and that's shocking.
And Brait's been a letdown comparatively, like to the past where Winston has gone to him.
Brait's a letdown from what he was. O.J. Howard, which I would have never thought, it seems like he might be and never will be. You know what I mean?
He's so good.
Maybe on a different team. Arians' offense has never been super focused on the tight end. Never. Like if you go back to the Cardinals, name the Cardinals Cardinals tight ends.
Jermaine Gresham.
Yeah, he was awesome.
Seals Jones.
So that offense is tough. But yeah, I wouldn't. The Bucks are hard because it's similar to Will Fuller. It's a landmine situation where you're just going to hope that you get the guy that gets the.
Outside of Godwin and Evans, you can't trust anybody from a fantasy perspective. Peyton Barber, Ronald Jones.
Yeah, other than defensive
they split the backfield pretty much. Nobody wants to touch that. On the other side of the ball, we had Teddy Bridgewater, who had a pretty good game.
314 yards.
A really good game.
4 touchdowns, yeah.
Now, the question is, are teams, if you watch any of this game, teams are starting to jam the box and go beat us elsewhere. You're not going to beat us with Alvin Kamara. And that's apparent because Kamara did nothing.
Yeah, and Michael Thomas had 182
so
yards
you
and 2
hope
touchdowns.
if Teddy, I like Teddy, if he can maintain this, it'll be interesting to see how teams defend it. But for how many weeks do teams keep going, we're going to jam the box because it seems like if you're the Bucks secondary is not good. So if you have a better secondary that can play man up and get rid of Michael Thomas and still stuff the box, it could cause problems. I like Teddy Bridgewater. That's the Saints are very much an ongoing development. Like we have to see how they go, how teams play them. We're not going to know. If you're starting anybody from the Saints, you want to have Alvin Kamara or Michael Thomas, but you might be in for a couple weeks of figuring out what exactly you have.
I was partially confused in the past when Thomas got the largest contract in history because I knew he was good, but I didn't think he was top salary paid. This performance that he's had with Bridgewater post-contract is confirmation to me that, I'm kind of happy to have him.
I also think that contract, is getting off the beaten path. I think that contract was more, we have the space and we want to lock up the team we had because last year we were one mistake away from the Super Bowl. And it wasn't even our mistake or the other team's mistake. It was a ref mistake. So I think it was one of those things where it was, we lost Ingram, we lost a couple of small pieces. We have to lock up every part of the team we had last year. So, and somebody was going to pay him that. Like if you didn't pay him that, somebody else would have. So you had to pay him that. And Drew, I think Drew was like, I want him, and you go, okay.
I think this is also more proof that a team is going to work if the coach is good. I mean, the coach is going to find ways to make these teams win. I mean, with Drew Brees going down, that everybody's like, well, I guess we'll go Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater looked great.
If Bridgewater continues this trajectory, does he get a starting job next year?
Yeah,
last year
on the New Orleans Saints. No, I mean he turned down a starting job.
Miami.
Starting job. As a quarterback, there's only 32 of those positions around. You're not going to turn down any one of them unless you know that's the thing. Like Trev just said, you have a coach the level of Peyton. You have a guy ahead of you like Drew. You know he's going to retire soon. You stay there because of the situation. I don't think he'll go anywhere now.
I think this proves that Saints are going to look after this season and go, we need to make sure you're our next guy.
Yeah, and I think if he's going to play long enough, I think you look at Brees' contract. I think Brees will go out a little bit more like traditional, that's not a good way to put it. A little bit, he's going to go out smoothly because he means so much to the city of New Orleans, where I don't think he'll drag it out like other players have. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. Like a lot of people look at Eli and Brett Favre and these quarterbacks who don't want to retire. And you shouldn't have to retire if you think you can play. I think Drew, on the other hand, is just going to be like, I have everything I need.
Yeah.
I mean this much to the city of New Orleans. Like, I want them to be better. That just seems like the kind of guy Drew Brees is. So I think Teddy Bridgewater will stay there until he's the starter because of the situation. Like Trev said, like when you get to play for Sean Payton, it seems to mean more than a lot of other coaches. When you have that coach, I think Tom Brady's one of the all-time great quarterbacks. But because he has Bill Belichick,
he's not definitively the number one.
Because the situation, he's the greatest football mind to ever exist. So
I think an interesting situation to potentially look out for, and I might be a little crazy as far as one of these conundrums, would be that, okay, Big Ben retires at the end of the year. Came off the injury. They don't have a first-round pick in the upcoming draft. Do they really have enough analysis of Mason Rudolph? Could they be ones to go after Teddy Bridgewater and say,
see that.
Hey, they have the tools and the resources. They have Juju. They somewhat have a running game. They have a great offensive line. That's a situation I could see Teddy Bridgewater leaving for.
Now, these tools you speak of on the Steelers, where are they right now? Because I don't see any.
AB's somewhere in some type of canvas. And
they got Minka Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, on the defensive side of the ball. And their defense also stinks. I don't know. I think Teddy stayed there for a reason. I think it's a matter, too, of loyalty to some degree because they paid him a lot. And
he's the best, he's the best backup in the NFL. Like I don't think you can name a better backup.
But no team was willing to bet on him after his injury, and the Saints did. So does that mean anything to the player? Guy by guy, you don't know. That could mean a lot to him, that no other team was willing to give him a contract. They did. He's going to pay it forward to that team and wait for Drew to retire and go.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I think it speaks volumes of the Saints that Bridgewater stayed there. He had the perfect opportunity in Miami to want to go and compete and have the job handed to him.
Yes.
And he wanted to stay with an organization that looks better for his future long term.
And I think going forward, it could be something really interesting too, where, and this is a long shot, but the way Sean Payton, after Drew retires, does Sean Payton do some kind of new system with Taysom Hill and Teddy Bridgewater where you run a dual quarterback? We saw a little bit of it with the Wildcat years ago, but that was really just a running back kind of playing and a quarterback. Mm-hmm. This could be more of you're going to get one of two quarterbacks. Both can throw, both can kind of run. You don't know what play you're going to run into. It could be a really interesting system. If anybody was going to put it on the field, it's going to be Sean Payton. And with Alvin Kamara there, that's the perfect outlet to run that system. So going forward, it'll be interesting. Drew, he's hurt. The whole thing is with these older quarterbacks, when they get hurt, it's harder to recover. So we'll see what Drew comes back as. Drew could be retired at the end of this year if he doesn't recover properly. So you saw when Peyton at the end of his career, anytime you get hurt that old, it's just not going to turn around quickly. Even if it's a thumb, it's just not going to turn around quickly. They were explaining the surgery. I was like, that's pretty complex. His old bones might not hold those screws as good as they used to, Right. So Saints are an interesting one to look forward to. I'm really happy for Teddy Bridgewater too, by the way. Just a small side note. He's, from everything everyone has said, when he was at Louisville, Minnesota, he was an awesome kid who just horrible injury. He almost lost his leg in the ambulance after that injury. Yeah. And he said to the EMTs he was losing feeling in his leg, and they were like, we got to get there faster. So it's really great to see, him turn it around, and that's a great game. 314 and 4 touchdowns. That's awesome. But Kamara stunk, so.
Yeah, well, he had an off game. He had an off game. You know who didn't have an off game? Dalvin Cook.
Dalvin Cook doesn't seem to have off games right now.
Vikings 28, Giants 10. We had questions about Kirk Cousins in the past. This whole entire season so far about what's really going on with this team, but the balance of this offense is awesome.
They might be the most complete team top to bottom other than quarterback. And Cousins, it shows you when Cousins plays terrible, they're still pretty good. And when he plays good, they're one of the best 4 teams in the league, easy, because their defense and their line and their running game is so good. And that pair of receivers.
You say they have a good balance, and that balance is Dalvin Cook and Adam Thielen and not Stephon Diggs.
He had targets, though.
He had 3 catches. Do you think he'll be there by the end of next week?
Yeah.
You think he's going to stay? He's not going to get traded? He seems to be wanting to force his way out.
He can try to force his way out. They have at this point in the season, it's very interesting. I don't know why you trade him. I don't know what you're going to get.
Unless Stephon's going to be talking to Antonio Brown about the best way to force yourself off another team or something. I don't see Stephon Diggs going anywhere for the rest of the year. I think the Vikings are still in this win-now bubble, essentially, they have with all the talent. They paid the money for Diggs. They paid the money for Thielen. They're not going to get anywhere near what they want.
And when I say balance, I know you're saying Cook has this many touches and Thielen has this many touches. But what that reads to me is Cousins was easier in the pocket, good offensive line, good tight end. If Thielen's your 1, Stephon Diggs is a phenomenal 2. And their defense is still really, really good. They held the Giants, Danny Dimes is the greatest quarterback that ever lived. And they get 10 points, and they just get shut down, and their defense still looks like Swiss cheese. So,
and everyone got hurt in the game.
Yeah, so they are still balanced.
I don't even understand why Saquon's rushing to get back week 6.
Yeah, if I was them, I'd be like, you can sit. We'd rather have a higher pick at this point. You have a lot to figure out. Let that kid work in the offense with the receivers, because if he comes back, they're going to make him run the ball 30 times a game the second he comes back. But yeah, Jones, you're still going to have to wait to see what Jones is.
It's a tough team to face. The Vikings are good.
Yeah, it was a steep test. And like you said, Gallman, which seemed like a hot pickup because Saquon was hurt, is now also out.
Yes.
So
he
get out there and get Hill. What is it?
Concussion, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And Gallman.
Yeah.
But he's had concussions.
Somebody got Courtney Sutton from him.
Who's their next? I know. I don't know who the next running back is.
Jonathan Hillman, Rutgers.
Yes.
Oh my God, he went to Rutgers. Stay away from him.
The scary part for this is Ingram and Shepard out. Those were the majority of the offensive targets. So we're really going to find out a ton about Daniel Jones against a strong Patriots defense this week with no stars on his team. This is
Golden Tate.
If Daniel Jones can show something in this game, there's a lot more promise. If he doesn't show anything,
which he won't,
most likely won't.
I agree with you to a degree. That Patriots defense is really, really good, especially in the secondary. I don't know if this is the game where you're going to look at it and go, "Oh, that young quarterback didn't perform." That's a steeper test than Minnesota. So he's going to get the rest of the season to prove himself. So I wouldn't.
I'm not saying cut him off. He's terrible based on this game. I'm saying if he shows something.
Oh, okay.
It means a lot.
It means a lot.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. Oh, okay. Then I agree with Trev. Yeah, it's not going to happen.
The upset of the week: Bears 21, Raiders 24. I don't know what's going on with the Bears. Yeah. I personally bet on this game because I got so confident after that Monday night game. Yeah. I can't bet on the Bears for the rest of the season, though.
It's really strange. And the thing, too, is Chase Daniel is no better or no worse than Mitch. So you just never know what you're going to get out of the Bears.
Other than Allen Robinson, Trev's stone cold block of the year.
I was really high on David Montgomery going into this game and going in for the rest of the season. He had 11 carries for 25 yards. I mean,
their offense just doesn't produce. But Josh Jacobs on the other side is dominant. Who could have called that versus Montgomery? Oh, wait, I did versus Ross. He seems to just be a super bell cow, as where Montgomery, they seem to be struggling to input him in that offense, which is really strange. Tariq Cohen seems like a better prospect, especially in like PPRs.
He just hasn't been performing, though. I invested a decent amount in the Tariq Cohen going into this year, especially post Montgomery hitting the team. And I've been let down.
Yeah.
But this is
he had 6 receptions, 39 yards. He's lining up in the slot a lot. He's on the field a lot. That's all you can really ask for. I think he's a good buy low right now. Honestly, I'd be holding on to him and expecting a little bit more from him.
It's interesting though because of how bad the Bears look game to game. They have a ton of offensive weapons. The one thing with the Raiders is, other than Jacobs, I mean, they have no receivers. I look at it now and I'm trying to figure out how they won that game.
It looked like Gruden was managing Derek Carr. Like his passes, he didn't have something very far down the field. I think maybe it was 7 or 8 yards. Was this
25 completions for 229 yards is well less than 10 yards of completion.
Yeah,
that's pretty bad.
Very low.
Their leading receiver is Moreau, 4 receptions for 46. I'm not going to say his first name because I don't know what it is. But Jacobs, gets the boon of he's just getting a ton of touches. I just don't know how good the Raiders can be. I know they're 3-2. There's just nothing there.
They're overperforming. They're getting a lot of overperformance from their players.
Foster Moreau.
Okay.
Who's T. Davis then?
I'd be stoked if I had Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is going to perform. He's going to get 25 to 32 carries a game, and you hope he's going to get 100 yards, and he's going to always get the ball around the end zone.
And he's light years better than Damian Harris.
Yes.
Who's non-existent.
Yeah, I mean, there was a reason. I mean, they see things where we said in the draft, ooh, Damian Harris, he was the better running back at Alabama.
I was just being played.
I know, but a lot of people said that, and it was just, there's a reason every team had Josh Jacobs a lot higher.
Did Tyrell Williams even play in this game, or was he injured?
I think he was out.
They've got a ton of injuries. We're not going to get back into the AB situation. They're devoid of weapons other than Jacobs and Waller, which has been a nice surprise, but there's just not a whole lot there. And now with the Burfict suspension being upheld, their defense is kind of short on weapons.
Yeah.
They're 3-2. If I'm them, they're going to be one of those teams that they're going to overperform, and it's going to cost them a high draft pick.
I can't believe they're 3-2. That's crazy.
Yeah. And the Bears are 3-2 also. If I'm the Bears, the way I played the first 5 weeks, I'd be stoked at 3-2 because they have not looked good.
No.
So if I'm 3-2 there in that division, I'm like, all right.
Tariq Cohen needs to be more involved in this offense. He's not getting nowhere near the amount of touches that he did last year at this time of the position of the NFL season. 6 catches for 39 yards, I believe, for this week. 4 carries for 10 yards. I know he's not the running back that'll carry the ball, but you need to use his speed in the offense to create mismatches, especially with a quarterback like Chase Daniel.
Yeah, I think the weapons that they have, Cohen is not going to be their really running back like you were saying. Mm-hmm. But Montgomery's got to get more boom in this offense. It's not there.
Don't you almost feel though like that Nagy, last year his play calling was so good, and that was their defense. They rode their defense, but their offense always seemed to come through. He seems so out of touch this year. His play calling's terrible. Like you said, Montgomery was having a decent, but he only had 11 carries.
Do you think defensive coordinators have figured out Nagy and Nagy's failing to make the adjustment?
No, I don't think their defense is performing up to snuff either. I mean, they let the Raiders with no weapons score 24 points. That's a team that if I'm that Bears defense, I should be holding to 10 points. Yeah. Easy, if not a shutout. If you score 21 points in this game, I'm not saying their offense is good because they didn't perform great, but Chase Daniel had a better stat line than Mitch Trubisky usually has. That you should be holding with that defense, you should be holding the Raiders team sub 13 points.
And they ran all over them.
If you say we're going to score 21 points against the Raiders in London, I go, I'll take it because our defense is definitely going to hold them to less than that. 24 points from that Raiders offense, that's partially on the defense too. And to his self-admitted, what's his name? Your ex-coach, the defense coordinator. Pagano. He said at the beginning of the season, there was this quote from him where he said, "This defense is so good at every level, all I want to do is not get in the way." You're kind of getting in the way at this point. You're not Vic Fangio. You're not getting the most out of those players. So
story of my life.
It's just one of those things where these two teams are confusing to me. I don't know what you're going to get from any one player other than probably Jacobs and Allen Robinson.
Yeah, but you have the Eagles who just are starting to come to form and step up. Granted, it was against the Jets just recently. Eagles won 31, Jets 6.
Man.
Eagles feel like they got to have some momentum finally coming. Where it looked 2 weeks ago of they have to win this game to get things right.
Yeah. It's funny, as an Eagles fan, when they beat the Packers, I was like, okay, we beat the Packers. That means we're going to lose to the Jets next week. But, the Jets are just really, really bad. So that was an easy enough win, I suppose.
Sometimes you forget, too, how many weapons the Eagles have. Like when they won the Super Bowl, it was all that defense and how deep the defensive line was. And you kind of forget that they've only added offensive weapons since then for the most part. Darren Sproles was hurt last year. He looks great this year. I mean, not for a fantasy perspective, but they're getting exactly what I need out of him. Both tight ends look great. I wish Ertz would retire so Goddard can get in full time, because every time Goddard gets the ball, I'm like, he is a plug and play in any other offense. Easy.
Ertz fans have to be pretty happy to see him getting utilized finally, fantasy production.
If I was the one knock I have on the Eagles, who their receiving core not quite up to snuff. I mean, they will be. You have Deshaun.
First game they looked awesome, but once they're all back,
you have Deshaun,
healthy.
you have Alshon, you have Arcega-Whiteside. At this point, I would just take Ertz and put him in the slot and start Goddard as my tight end. That would be my go-to move. Both those tight ends should be on the field on every play. So many, you can't really start Goddard right now because he's not on the field enough. They're the two of the best offensive weapons they have, if not the two best offensive weapons they have, other than Carson Wentz.
Who are you gonna? That's a bit of a stretch. I mean, Alshon Jeffrey still is a great player, and Deshaun Jackson stretches the field like nobody else can on that offense. I think Goddard's good, but he had a big case of the dropsies earlier a couple weeks ago as well.
So did the whole team.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I'm just saying, if I'm the Doug Peterson and I want to design that offense, I want both those receivers on the field. I want Ertz and Goddard on the field and one running back. That would be how I was running things. And they don't. They seem to be, kind of confused. That's the one thing. Carson Wentz is playing great, but they seem kind of confused on what they want to be.
I know it's not the Eagle way to do things, and I know Jim's going to love me for saying this. I really want to see more Miles Sanders involved in this offense moving forward. I just liked what I saw out of him from Penn State. I know a lot of people in the league may have questioned Jim taking him that high in the draft last season. But he is definitely could be one of those premier running backs moving forward. Yes, Jordan Howard's great from a running back perspective in between the tackles and the goal line. I think Miles Sanders has a very well-rounded set that would be a great balance for this Eagles offense.
That's something I want to see.
I'm not saying
the Eagles are actually going more Howard.
I'm not.
I would. To be fair, Jordan Howard was 4.8 yards per carry, and Miles Sanders was 1.7 yards per carry.
I understand. I understand what Ross is saying. Yeah, he looked good at Penn State for 1 year. He doesn't look good when he's in. He doesn't look good.
He's looked pretty good at times. He's also had times where he hasn't looked good.
He's explosive catching the ball. Yeah. That's what I've noticed.
So then, with him, is the most you're gonna? What you want is a bell cow back, or at least a split time back. But is the most you're gonna get out of him if you're saying he's good out of the backfield? And he does. He looks like a good scat back, but. Are you just going to get Darren Sproles Part 2 kind of thing?
I think
that's not what you want out of him.
A Tariq Cohen type thing, possibly, like old Tariq
James
Cohen.
White.
And if Jordan Howard stuff still has to happen, he's had some pretty big holes when he's gotten his opportunities, and he's gotten opportunities on the goal line where Sanders has had very, very little of those.
I'll give it to you. I didn't like Sanders coming in. I didn't think there was a big enough sample size, and I don't like the way he looks, and I like the other running backs better. Out of the backfield, Sproles looks good. He looks about the same. He looks like somewhere in between Howard and Sproles. So if they've got to choose which one they want on the field, they'll just choose one of the better of the full products.
The Eagles always go with a hot hand. That's been their motto for that offense for years. Trev knows it better than anybody. Unless your name is LaShawn McCoy somehow in that backfield.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to do. Or Brian Westbrook, I should say. That's where they're going to go.
The other side of this, though, is Howard has looked good. I'm not like...
Yeah.
I'm invested in Sanders, but I'm not going to... give credit. I'm not going to hold back from giving credit where it's due. Yeah. Like Howard does look good.
Yeah, and the Eagles the past couple years have just been a rotation.
Yeah.
Like some guys are in for certain plays, and
that hot hand thing was Andy Reid thing. I feel like Pedersen does a better rotation. Hey, but on the other side, how about all those great Jet players on the Jets?
Well, there is one highlight that I took from it, even though this was, what was it, Falk?
I'm excited to hear what this is because I can't find one. So.
The highlight for me, but this might be because of Falk and not of what's going to happen when Darnold comes back, was Demaryius Thomas had 9 targets. It was 4 catches for 47 yards, but it was still 9 targets. So
cool,
including one that was hit off his hands and he just straight.
He's the worst hands. You can nine targets.
I'm not saying it's great. I'm just saying it's
interesting. It's interesting.
Le'Veon Bell also had 9 targets.
And 15 carries.
And 15. Yeah, there's
Bell
you're digging deep, and it's fine.
I'm not saying I love.
No, yeah.
I'm not saying go out and buy Demaryius Thomas. I think because it's Luke Falk is probably the reason why it was so many targets.
And the Eagles' defense looked really good. Yeah. I mean, it's the Jets, so like they had 10 sacks and 2 touchdowns on defense. So I mean,
yeah, you feel bad for that. It's like you're rolling out this kid Falk.
Into this, top notch.
It's just not going well for him.
They sent him out to the slaughter, kind of like the Ravens slaughtered the Steelers. 26-23. And when we speak of slaughterings, that was a ridiculous hit that knocked Mason Rudolph out.
Me and you had this talk a little earlier before we started. My first thought with that hit was not, oh, look how vicious that hit was. My first thought was, he's got a glass jaw. He's going to have problems staying healthy in this league. It was a big hit, but it was not the most like egregious helmet to helmet hit. I was like, if that knocks him out cold, because he was out cold going to the ground, and how bad it looked afterwards.
Afterwards, he looked like, where am I? Who am I? What is this? I was just
I was just like, man, he might have a harder time staying healthy.
Well, and did you guys notice that they couldn't pull the cart out? That was one of the big things. Is that
they had to like carry him.
They had to make it. They made him walk off. That is ridiculous. That is
so stupid.
Such a black eye on the NFL. Yeah. They have this huge protocol about neck injuries, head injuries. He had the face mask off. They were ready to take him,
and they couldn't get the golf cart to work.
They couldn't the golf cart, and they said it was user error, which means that the person screwed it up.
Yeah, whatever.
And they were like, "Well, okay, teammates, why don't you pick him up? Even though he has a possible neck injury, he got knocked out cold. Why don't you help him out off? Like, that's just crazy to me. Like, in this day of age, 2019, we're doing that. Like,
yeah, I mean that's not a good look. The other thing too is I don't think Mason Rudolph's their answer, so I don't know how big it is.
He started to look promising last week, but right now I'm not as ecstatic about Juju. It was nice to see Juju get some action in here, get some receptions, 7 for 75 yards, 1 touchdown, and Deontay Johnson also getting 8 targets.
I've asked this question, I think every week we've done this. How bad are the Steelers? I think they stink. I think they're one of the bottom 5 teams in the league.
I would not want to have traded away my first round pick for.
Yeah, and they still act like they're contenders, and Tomlin acts like they're contenders, and that's why you make a trade where you get rid of your first round pick for Minka Fitzpatrick. It just baffles. I don't know what they're doing. Nothing looks as effective.
Let's take it apart. This was an overtime game. It went to overtime, so they were fighting against the Ravens, who people were very high on. Like the Ravens have a good defense. Lamar Jackson's looking good, so. I mean, yeah, they're 1-4, and yeah, they're on their 3rd string quarterback, but
Lamar Jackson not looking so good.
Well, okay. Before this game, he was looking good.
You win. You know how often you win when you win the turnover battle, and they somehow still lost. That's kind of hard to do. It's like hard to do. I mean, it was an overtime game against a team, Baltimore, that I think is better than this game. That's the thing, is I didn't think Baltimore played well in this game, which maybe that's the Steelers defense coming around because they have a lot of young pieces. So that is something to watch out for. I mean, Minka Fitzpatrick, Edmonds, Devin Bush looks awesome.
Yeah.
So their defense I'm getting higher on, and they'll get better. The offense, I'm just not seeing. They just, like you said, Smith-Schuster looked better, but it doesn't look like that. When we moved on from Plaxico, then there was Emmanuel Sanders, and you immediately knew he was awesome. Then we moved on from him, and AB was sick nasty. And then you move on from AB, and it's Smith-Schuster, and you're like, that's not the one I want, you know?
They had also shifted to, like, Jalen Samuels doing this hybrid offense quarterback, you know, whatever you want to call it.
He's hurt now.
Yeah. He's out for, like, a month.
Yeah.
So it seemed like they were leveraging that as their direction with you know, Rudolph as a concern at times, and now it's really scary.
They're down to and Bob Ben's out for the year.
And remember, it's really funny because they traded Josh Dobbs. They had a 3rd string quarterback. Yeah. They carried one out of minicamp, and when Foles got hurt, they traded him to Jacksonville, and now it's like, wish you wouldn't have done that.
I hope Jacksonville trades it back to them and just
for more. Yeah, that'd be the greatest trade. Yeah.
It'd be a gym
awesome.
move.
That'd be awesome.
It really just mind-boggled me in this game how much Wildcat the Steelers ran in this game with Jalen Samuels.
Because they didn't have a quarterback.
I understood that. I understood. Even before when they didn't have a quarterback, though, even when Mason Rudolph was out there, that Jalen Samuel was running a lot of Wildcat. And I'm just like, this doesn't look like a Steelers offense running this Wildcat formation in here.
And that is, I think that is partially I don't think they're comfortable with him in that offense. I don't think the whole playbook's open to them, so they're trying to figure out anything
Even though
possible.
they came out and said that the reason why they traded for Minka Fitzpatrick is because they view Mason Rudolph as a first-round pick.
Cool. They're being proved super wrong.
Like you said, Dan, I really like the defense.
Yeah.
Defense looks great, but everything else...
The defense has a lot of growing to do. I don't think that's a way that they're going to become a contender. I think the defense will get them out of the bottom. Like, if I think they're the bottom 5 to 7 teams in the league, the defense is what's going to carry them out of there because the linebacking core is really coming around. Bush only looks better. The secondary, same thing. Like, those two, they'll have the best safety combo in the league eventually. Joe Hayden is still a really good cornerback. So they've got a lot of pieces on defense that'll make them better. Their offense, everything is underwhelming. When they got rid of Jesse James, it was, because it's going to be the Vance McDonald show. He's not. He's underwhelming.
Didn't they sign Will Dissly or what? Well, they did the other guy from. Didn't they sign?
Not Dissly.
Will Dissly.
Not Dissly. No. Nick Vannett. They signed Nick Vannett.
But the idea was that Vance McDonald was going to be it, and it seems like, and that's a good point. Like Vannett seems better than Vance McDonald, and Smith-Schuster doesn't seem to be carrying the load quite like they thought he would. James Conner, who when Le'Veon was holding out last year, I think Le'Veon Bell's probably like, where was this last year? You couldn't have done this last year. Yeah. Their offense just looks inept.
I think the Mike Tomlin countdown is beginning right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll be one of those guys where they'll agree to part ways at the end of the season, and then some other team will give him full control. Because there's a million teams that would take the Steelers' records. Mm-hmm. It's just not good enough for the Steelers. And that's a thing. It's like in college football. There are some teams that you expect more. And the Steelers are definitely one of them, where Patriots are now tied with them for Super Bowls. Cowboys are, I'm not going to get into Cowboys yet. Cowboys are good, so you don't want to get caught by other teams or get passed in Super Bowls. So there's a tier in which if you're the Steelers, we want to be this good. And if we're not that good, we need to find somebody else who can get that good. But if you're like the Redskins, you're not going to go full control to Mike Tomlin. Yeah. You know what I mean, kind of thing. So
it just shows how important Ben Roethlisberger has been to this team. Like, just everything. He's everything for this team.
The defensive side looks great. Our next defensive battle was a game to watch. It was just a slugfest. Bills 14, Titans 7. I love both these defenses as long as the Titans show up.
I love the Bills. It's ridiculous to say.
I'm so excited.
They're 4-1.
They're 4-1. They are this old school smash mouth football, and Singletary's not even playing. When they're running it with Frank Gore. It's ridiculous.
Gore, 35 years old.
The kid, Josh Allen, reminds me of an old school quarterback that gets cracked and goes down, has to be pulled out of the game. But he's like, no, I'm going back in. I probably got a concussion. You know what I mean?
For him to be back that quick after that concussion and have 23 for 32, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception.
Yeah, their defense is just rock solid. So the way I look at it is 4-1 now, and you just add offensive pieces in the offseason. They're the team that the Patriots are going to need to worry about.
They just need O-line and weapons.
Yep. The Titans still I still watch some of the Titans, and they show us flashes of that first week. But they put it all together against the Browns that first week, and they just can't seem to do it again.
Defense looks pretty solid. On the offensive side of the ball, we got the other terrible Mariota performance again. Like it's not even a coin flip. It's probably like 80% he's going to look terrible, 20% he's going to have a good game.
I don't want maybe Derrick Henry. I don't want any Titans players in fantasy.
A.J. Brown's targets just dropped like crazy this game.
That's so Mariota, though.
Their top receiver was Adam Humphries, 4 for 30. And then whoever Jay Smith is also had 1 catch for 57 yards.
Oh, good old Jay.
Yeah.
I mean, Derrick Henry.
Smith?
Oh, is it John?
Okay. Derrick Henry gets so many touches that you want him. Going forward, if it's a dynasty and not a redraft, I would definitely want A.J. Brown. I think A.J. Brown is going forward. When they move on from Mariota, he's got a lot of potential. That's about it, though.
Yeah, and Derrick Henry is fully touchdown dependent in fantasy. If he doesn't score a touchdown, he has 8 points. 7
or when he breaks out like an 80-yard run kind of thing.
For a touchdown.
Or he gets injured.
Yeah, well, there's that.
And even their defense, like I like their defense. I wouldn't want a whole lot of players in the defense because it's old. It's super old.
Linebacking core.
Dion Lewis, they spent a lot of money on like last offseason. He's been non-existent essentially in this role in the offense, and
he's on a decent amount of plays too. He's on the field.
Yeah, he's the receiving back, and their passing game stinks out loud. So it's gonna be a direct Mariota. He's one of the worst short down passers. It's crazy.
Which
He's
is
actually
insane.
better deeper, and short, he's terrible. Like, it's crazy. He overthrows and everything floats on him. It's just one of those things where that's where A.J. Brown, same thing. He's kind of touchdown dependent because every once in a while you're going to get a 40, 50-yard pass to A.J. Brown. But when you're the receiving back and he can't hit you 5 yards down the field on the sideline, like, that's crazy. That's just crazy to me.
I think it's just interesting because the people that you think would be the mismatches in this offense, like the Adam Humphreys of the world, like the Dion Lewises, aren't really that much of a difference maker, and it's because of Mariota.
Yeah.
In our next game, we had Patriots 33, Redskins 7. Some games you just lose, and you lose your job.
You know what's funny is, like, right away the Redskins they scored like first, and it was like, oh man, it was gonna be a game, and then it was like, oh no, it's not at all. Like, it was so quickly. And I remember even watching, and I got like a little excited because Brady, in the early parts of this game, Brady looked bad. He looked bad, and it was like, wait, is this gonna be a game? Is like this kind of? And then it was just like, no, it's not. The Redskins are that bad.
The red zone interception that he had, that it was a bad throw.
Yeah, and a lot of balls floated on him, and it's one of those things where I'm not gonna. He's awesome in his stat line, sick. He just didn't look quite as good early, and then he looked good later. The Redskins are terrible. It's like we talked before. It's like playing the Bengals. It's like playing the Dolphins. It's not going to get you a great gauge of your team. You're going to look awesome. I've said this before. Everyone gave the Cowboys heat for playing easy teams. They played the Bills. The Bills are a good team, but the New England has yet to really be tested, I think.
No, I agree. Yeah, and
but they're winning games they should win, so, and by a lot. So, and the defense is really good. Washington has a real issue at quarterback now.
Well, I think them bringing in Colt McCoy to start this week, if McCoy had performed better, because he had a terrible game, and Redskins showed more faith, the organization probably wouldn't have let go of Gruden. This was probably Gruden's, okay, I need to change quarterback so I can keep my job. Yeah. This is the type of thing where you actually appreciate what Flores is trying to do in Miami, because you go, he's securing his job for 3 years. It's weird to think that way, but the reality is, like, you're giving yourself the best opportunity for the future and setting up the team appropriately, rather than, let me just try and patch this up here real quick. Let me try and do this real quick. You're getting strangled out of your last options.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. This is actually, I read this somewhere. This is how the Dolphins and the Bengals are kind of making moves. Like, they have some young players. The Redskins are doing things how you become the next Cleveland Browns. They've drafted a quarterback that was that Gruden wanted, who they now fired Gruden. The quarterback is not a quarterback that's ready this year. So if you're terrible and you're in the top 5 picks,
they may not even be ready next year.
But that's the thing, is if you're in the top 5 picks, which they most likely will be, do you take another quarterback?
Yes.
And go double down on Dwayne Haskins? And then if Dwayne Haskins still isn't good, it's these bad decisions and these weird ways of, like, doubling down and thinking, like, oh man, we're going to contend this year. You weren't going to contend this year. You should have known that. And I know that stinks to say, and everyone wants to contend. Some of the worst teams, which, to their credit, the Dolphins were like, we're not going to be good. We're going to set up to make sure we're good going forward.
I don't understand how the Redskins thought they were a contender.
I don't know if they did. I don't know but just the way they handle things. I mean, the Dwayne Haskins thing, he wasn't ready, and I think that kind of how far behind he was doesn't mean he won't be, but I think it caught them off guard about how far behind he was.
Really actually is, yeah.
The problem is when you get rid of your coach that quickly, you now have to go, we need to get him in to see where we are with him. That way, if we have a top 3 pick and one of those 3 to 4 quarterbacks is there, we need to get to the next quarterback kind of thing.
Right now, today, this is the worst franchise in the NFL.
Not a chance.
You hear me out. This is why I say the Redskins are the worst franchise in the NFL. Dan Snyder, probably in my opinion, is the worst NFL owner in the league. They throw money like nobody's business in free agency. They have never had a football mind in there since Scott McLuhan left because of his alcoholic addiction. They traded up to back into the first round with the Colts, and they gave them their second round pick in this year's draft, which is going to be pick 33 through 36, because they're going to finish in the top 5 for their overall pick. They're a team without a vision right now. There's no foundation essentially in place. You put Haskins out there for a half. I think you just roll Haskins out there regardless if he is ready or not for the rest of the season. What do you have to lose aside from the experience that you're getting?
Dwayne Haskins.
Yes.
Go all in, refranchise, call yourself the Washington Haskins, put his face on the helmet.
Yes. You should take this opportunity to change your team name with how bad they are.
It's the perfect opportunity.
I agree with that.
So much
Here's the
money.
thing. I'll give Ross the fact that if you take all facets in, where we're going, ownership, the discord in the locker room, then maybe, the Dolphins are easily the worst playing team in the NFL.
Yeah,
by a large margin.
I will take the Dolphins situation right now over the Redskins situation.
Because in 3 years, the Dolphins will be a good team and the Redskins will still be
trying to figure this out. Yeah, and it all kind of hinges, like we've all said, on Haskins. If they double down on him, they're going to live and die by how good he is in a year. I disagree with the concept. A lot of people say this, and I totally disagree from a football perspective of roll them out there, see what you get. No. That's not how quarterbacks work. If you roll them out too early and they're compromised, they'll never get back the confidence they need.
How many first-round picks,
it doesn't matter.
On the bench, though?
It doesn't matter.
How many have sit and rot on the bench? When you put that equity in that capital, you got to roll them out there.
No.
Wait a minute. People said that Daniel Jones was going to sit this entire year.
And he was ready, so they put him out there. Dwayne Haskins isn't ready.
Many people thought Haskins was more ready than Daniel Jones is.
But they're not once you got them into practice. You got him into preseason and into games, and Daniel Jones looks good. Haskins isn't there yet, so you don't just roll him out there and let him struggle, or else you're never going to recover him. You gotta limp along with Colt McCoy and wait for him to be ready. Or you roll him out like you said, and if he's compromised, you get rid of him, and you wasted your first-round pick this year. Teams don't like to take the long route. The more time you sit and let the game slow down and understand the game, the better you will be. Aaron Rodgers is 100% proof of this. Multiple quarterbacks are proof of this. If you roll him out now, he's done. You're going to take another quarterback.
I think the other huge problem is if we're comparing the Giants situation to the Redskins situation, the Giants have this is not exactly true, but the Giants have a lot more weapons on their team.
Yeah, it's a much better situation.
The Giants have Saquon Barkley. If Daniel Jones falters, he can hit off to the best running back in the league. He has Evan Ingram, who's a good tight end. They got some decent receivers in Shepard and Tate. The Redskins have nothing. Yeah, they have Adrian Peterson.
McLaurin is their best receiver.
And Terry McLaurin.
And there's no reason for that to be the case.
Who looks good.
Yes,
but there's nobody else on that team.
Reason for that to be the case. There's no way you get to the regular season and go, Terry McLaurin's our best receiver.
So I see where Dan's coming from, but at the same time, I also see where you're coming from it. In the situation, you want to give him a shot, but I don't know if this is a good enough team to give him a shot.
I can see both sides. I mean, I definitely see both sides. Like, do I potentially think Josh Allen got played too soon than where he is right now? Because I see him overthrowing, making bad decisions as far as interceptions. Do I think if he stepped back and stayed a little more time? Yeah, but I also think that, there's a lot of times when everybody's job's on the line, especially in the NFL, from GMs and stuff, that they're thrusted into these situations. And the fact that Washington already threw him out for one half of a game, you're already telling your fan base and franchise, we're ready to make this commitment now. And then to pull back, it's not well to the fan base as far as
it'll be interesting to see what the new coach does.
Yeah, I'll say that. The thing is they're going to be in a holding pattern until the end of the year until they get a coach and stuff.
They'll play Haskins this year at some point further. It's just a matter of when. I think contextually with teams, you do need to either shit or get off the pot with certain guys, but a lot of times it's healthier to develop your guy for at least a year.
Yeah, and that's where I would agree with you 100%. And this was kind of goes back to Ross too, is it stinks. Like, you've now put this young kid who's not ready into a situation that sucks for him. And it's similar to Josh Rosen, where he wasn't ready 100%. If you gave him another year, and the road is littered with quarterbacks that didn't get enough development time or were given not enough development time but never turned into anything, and it stinks. That's part of the system. And like we were talking about before, there's a ton of situations where you get put in the right situation and you're Alvin Kamara because the one coach that liked you in the draft was Sean Payton.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good situation to have. But then you're Bryce Petty and you end up on the Jets, and they said he's going to take 4 years to develop. The Jets take him, and they always want him to play, and he never gets
4
ready.
Years. That's
it wasn't 4, but they said it was multiple years.
I think Christian Hackenberg's a worse example.
Oh, he was
Hackenberg was just a bad. He was just a bad quarterback.
Yeah.
These are guys that, like, out of college had some potential. Who was the kid out of Memphis?
Paxton
Lynch. Where they were like, he's a developmental project. Goes to the Broncos. The Broncos are like, we want to play him right now. And it was, you can't. Why'd you take him? You shouldn't have taken him then.
You guys do make a good point. Redskins don't really have a lot of weapons. Yeah. When your biggest targets are 7 targets each between McLaurin and Thompson, it's still decent, but that's the best you have to offer. It's not like how the Chargers in the Chargers-Bronco game, Mike Williams, 13 targets, Austin Eckler, 16. This is what you want from a team. Broncos ended up winning, though, 20-13.
It's funny that Mike Williams actually finally showed up for a game. I mean, and it was only 6 catches, 74 yards. But he's been quiet. He going into this season, fantasy-wise, he was hyped. He had so many touchdowns last year. He had a ton of catches. He was looking pretty good, and he's been pretty quiet up until this game. Well, we'll see where he goes from here, though.
It's interesting. Those are nice stat lines for the receivers and Eckler out of the backfield.
15 receptions.
Look at Phillip Rivers' stat line. He's 32 for 48 for 200 yards. Yeah, you're going to get a ton. You're going to get a ton of receptions. They're going to be for no yards.
The Broncos have been his kryptonite throughout his entire career.
The 1-4 Broncos.
I don't 100%. They've been his kryptonite with much better teams. The Broncos are not a good team. A 1-4 team or a 0-4 team should not be your kryptonite. And you shouldn't be checked. I don't understand how that's your average per attempt. His average per attempt is what, 4 yards? His completion per attempt is 6? That's insane. I've never seen a stat line like that ever.
It's crazy to see the volume.
With the amount of weapons they have.
And it was good to see Gordon back in the game doing more runs, but it was only 12 carries, significantly more than Eckler. But they don't want to have Eckler off the field. Yeah. Eckler, they're making him transition. People who drafted him in redrafts are still going to get the payoff for the rest of the year. That was great to see for Eckler owners.
Yeah, and on the other side, the Broncos, Cortland Sutton still looks good. He seems to be good. They're a little confused at 2. Emmanuel Sanders is kind of fading, and Deshaun Hamilton's not doing anything. So they seem a little confused at their second. But I mean, other than Phillip Lindsay,
Yeah, he had a big game. He's been looking pretty solid for someone that was a waiver wire acquisition week 1 last year. He's looking like a solid.
And then they
take
player. Hoyce Freeman, and it's you're like, oh, he's just a stopgap.
Yeah,
and it's still
I guess so.
And it's still a split backfield. I mean, Lindsay had 15 carries. Royce Freeman had 13 carries.
Yeah, they're on the field similar amounts. Lindsay was a little bit on.
He's so much more involved in the passing game.
Yeah, but that's exactly what it is.
And Lindsay gets. I know it sounds ridiculous. He gets the better plays. Hoyce Freeman's mostly up the middle with a subpar offensive line, as where Phillip Lindsay's got the much more interesting packages in terms of like screen passes, tosses, stuff like that, where he's getting out in space. So the touches are the same, but Lindsay's like the poor man's Alvin Kamara, where like they're using him in all those. They're trying to use him in all those types of ways. It's not quite as successful, but I'd much with it like you said, with a split backfield, I'd much rather have Lindsay than Hoyce Freeman.
So interesting development with the Chargers that was going on this week is that Hunter Henry is actually looking like he might be back within a week or 2. So do you guys expect anything from him going forward? He was a big name going in before he was going to be out for the season this year, but I think he'll probably be back in a week or 2.
It's interesting going forward, looking at why they're so off track in terms of just what they were last year to now. You get Melvin Gordon back. If you do get Hunter Henry back, they should be back on track. But it didn't seem like they should be this off track with what they were missing. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be nice to see that kid get back because, the sky's the limit was for him and he hasn't played in like 2 years. But I don't know. Something's missing here this year. And it just doesn't seem like it's going to change.
Is it the running game of 35 yards that they had this game?
Keenan Allen was shut down too, pretty much.
Yeah. But when you only have one receiver, it's not quite as hard to do.
They threw the ball 48 times and carried the ball 16. You think that had something to do with it?
Yeah, and this always kills me is you have Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler, and the game is no more than a touchdown game, and all you're doing is throwing the ball. You
need to have better balance. It's going to pay off everything.
Yeah, agreed. But yeah, that game was weird. Those two teams are strange. I didn't think the Broncos would be that bad, by far. I thought they'd be like a middling team, and they're real bad. And who would have thought the Chargers were going to be that bad? 2 and 3.
I don't know.
Not a chance.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll get it back on track. Though you kind of everyone the whole this is Phillip Rivers' last rodeo. If they're this bad, it could definitely be his last rodeo. They could be moving on from, especially, we kind of joke about it it seems like his throwing motion gets slower every week. And now if you're only completing passes for on average 4 yards, why am I not going to try somebody else?
Huge game for the Packers. They closed out the Cowboys 34-24. There's a lot that can be said about this game. One of the highlights for me was Aaron Jones, like breaking in, making his name be cemented as the Green Bay running back.
And receiving option as well, apparently, with Devontae Adams out. He had 7 receptions for 75 yards. Yeah, he looked nasty.
Anyone who invested in him just feels so rewarded, even though it's just like kind of one game, really. Maybe there's little splashes in the season so far, but investment is very positive.
The one thing that's kind of disappointing is knowing Devontae Adams wasn't going to play. You would, looking at, for myself, MVS and other guy, Geronimo Allison, who's going to step up? Those receivers didn't really seem to step up at all. Aaron Jones stepped up, but the tough thing with Aaron Rodgers is when he gets comfortable, if you don't go out and prove yourself, he'll go to the next guy. That's what worries me about a lot of those receivers, where if you're not going to, show yourself, he's going to move on to guys out of the backfield. Like you saw Jimmy Graham, not this week, the week before that. He was like, I want to get Jimmy Graham more involved in the offense. Hit him in the end zone twice in the hands. He dropped it. Jimmy Graham's targets went down to 3 this week. Like Aaron Rodgers is the smartest quarterback in the game right now, so he's going to remember that stuff. So if you don't prove yourself, he'll find somebody else that good. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, 4 targets, 1 reception. That worries me. He should have been a go-to number 1 this week.
I expected so much more from him this week. There was a lot of DFS plays I had with him, and it was a huge letdown.
It is tough. They line him up around, like, they don't move Byron Jones. The Cowboys have good secondary, and like whenever he was on Byron Jones just shut him down. But when he was on the other side against Awuzie, like he should have done better, and he just didn't show up. He's not attacking the ball the way he should with Aaron Rodgers. Like with Aaron Rodgers, you want to go out and get the ball because he'll find somebody that can. So, that was a little disappointing. But yeah, Aaron Jones is the huge bright spot.
What I did love is more confirmation of when you spoke fondly of Michael Gallup a couple weeks ago. He looked good. 14 targets for him as well as Amari Cooper. Michael Gallup is a shining star about to happen there.
Yeah. If we get into the Cowboys, it's going to be tough. This is what you get out of Dak Prescott. And this is what worries me going forward is you'll get weeks 1 and 2. You're going to get last week and this week too. He looked terrible. He looked awful. He was missing easy throws. 27 of 44.
463
3 interceptions.
Yards.
Yeah, because but look at their run after the catch. Amari Cooper and Gallup have Amari Cooper has 226 yards, and none of those passes are more than like 30 yards downfield. So he's got a ton of rack. But Dak's sailing on basic throws, and this is where you're going to have to pay him so much. Look at this game. He should not be making that top tier money because he can't make all the throws, and that should be okay. They got down in such a hole. The Packers are a good team. You saw in the second half what I felt like this game should be, but it was too late.
Yeah. I find it interesting that Jerry Jones comes out first thing Monday, or maybe it was yesterday. I'm sorry.
It was yesterday.
But to go and have to flex the conversation in a way that it's contract negotiation. This is why we don't want to pay so much. It's so stupid that they have to go through this public song and dance to make
Jerry Jones.
It's the worst thing you can do as an owner because this may upset Dak further if he continues to do these shenanigans throughout the season.
For a billionaire and like a ridiculously good like businessman, I would assume he's like the worst negotiator ever. Like even the Zeke stuff, like he handled the Zeke stuff so badly that I love Zeke and I'm glad they paid him. They overpaid a little bit on Zeke though, with their offensive line. But it was just because of how he handled it. He had to overpay to satiate him. And it's the same thing with Dak. He comes out and does stuff like that, and then he says, but Dak's our quarterback. He's always going to be a Cowboy. Shut up. Yeah. Stop saying you're going to pay him. Because after this game, I think at this point, everyone was like, after the first game, you pay him, and now he looks back. Just shelf it. End of the season. Let him play out the season. We'll see where we are. Same thing with Jason Garrett. If he keeps playing like this, he'll get fired. If he keeps playing like this, you don't have to pay Dak. If he plays awesome and they're in the NFC Championship game, pay Dak.
Cowboys are in a weird spot. The way I look at it, you had hopes of top 5 team over the past couple weeks. Yeah. Let me just finish this thought. I don't think they're a bad team. I think they're the best team Dallas has had in over a decade. I do think they are a threatening top 5 team, but I don't think they're in, Saints, Rams territory.
I'm not as high on the Rams then, I guess, as you are.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I would actually tend to say Green Bay, Saints. Right now in the NFC. Seahawks are inconsistent, their defenses.
Green Bay is interesting what's going on with Rodgers right now because, fantasy, we're used to seeing performances from him. So he is managing, so he has a lot more faith in that defense. But we are once again let down production-wise from fantasy on Rodgers.
Yeah, let me get back to the Cowboys real quick. I think the season, for better or worse, will go the way... Dak is eventually going to have to win football games. And so he's going to have to play well. The other thing is going to have to happen is the offensive line has to stay healthy. That offensive line has not stayed healthy in 4 years. Tyron Smith has got a massive contract. He hasn't played a full season in 4 years. So it's one of those things where, and last year, the whole thing with Travis Fredericks and now Lael Collins, it's a lot of holes. So you paid Zeke, but if he's behind a banged up line, how much can you run? And then if Dak can't throw, stuff for the Cowboys, if that offensive line is hurt, is going to snowball quickly. That whole team, that whole offense is built around that offensive line. So that's the thing I'll say with the Cowboys. The Cowboys are always going to be a lightning rod for, oh my, they lost 2 games. They stink now. It's like, all right, let's just sit back. And they'll keep playing teams, and we'll see how they are. The Packers, Aaron Rodgers has not looked as good. I think it's just that offense, though. I think it's LaFleur's offense.
Yeah, but they're 4-1.
Yeah. So, I mean...
They're doing something right.
I think LaFleur's brought a lot more versatility to this offense that's not so much more is on Rodgers' shoulder compared to previous, Mike McCarthy offenses in the past. Looking at Rodgers' stat line, 22 of 44 here for 236 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. This was like Aaron Rodgers, the game manager. This wasn't Aaron Rodgers, the 3 touchdown, throwing the pass against the Cowboys in the playoffs to Jared Cook on the sideline to set up the game-winning field goal type of Aaron Rodgers. He was still his cerebral self, but I think you saw a different side as far as the evolution of Aaron Rodgers goes.
This game also, it's tough. This game, you thought it would have been closer. The Packers were up like 28-3 super fast. So he was game managing because that's what he should have done, and that's why Jones had such a big game because they just went to him constantly.
Right.
It's not a great, it's not a great barometer to figure out like what are they going to be like in a close game. I think Aaron Rodgers will still be good. Yeah.
I mean, the Packers,
they were fine.
To me, I didn't watch the game, but it looked like they dominated the game.
Yeah, they went to like LaFleur, the way he's going to run that offense is if they're in the lead, he's going to run the ball. Yeah. And that's where you like Aaron Jones a lot. I do think that going forward, if they don't have Devontae, they need to figure out a little bit. They need to figure out those receivers. They have so many good receivers. I think they got to lock in those roles and let those guys develop instead of just fluctuating all over the place. For better or worse, for Marquez Valdez, for Geronimo Allison, for St. Brown when he comes back.
Ross, on the other hand, everything feels a lot better when you don't need any luck. And that's the Colts.
Who needs luck?
They beat out the Chiefs 19-13. The talent is there on the Colts team, but there was a lot of hindrances that had to happen to the Chiefs to make this happen.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. It was a very interesting game. The way the Colts won this game, there was no other way they're going to win this game unless how this game unfolded. And it was a combination of Marlon Mack probably having one of his most career games so far in his NFL career. The offensive lines, the lines in the trenches for the Colts dominated both offensively and defensively. And then also I think there was a little happenstance. Mahomes having the ankle injury twice, once in the first half and once in the second half, really limited his mobility throughout the game. Then you lost Chris Jones to injury on the defensive line. Other injuries that sprinkled in throughout that made it even more difficult. You saw Patrick Mahomes try to be the pocket passer within the pocket to beat the defense. And after the game, Pat Mahomes came out and said they didn't do anything different than compared to when the Patriots beat us in the Super Bowl, comparative to how Detroit tried to play us 2 weeks ago.
Kansas City was never in the Super Bowl against the Patriots.
Oh, not Kansas City. Excuse me. When they played in the AFC Championship game, that's when Pat came out and said that it's a copycat league in the NFL, and the Colts really turned the script on how to beat them. Kansas City, in order to move forward, they need 2 things happen. Tyreek Hill needs to come back and really stretch the field and take away from a lot of the man coverage that was going on in this game by the Colts. And then the second thing being is that they really need to improve on that rush defense. Kansas City has the worst ranked rush defense in the league.
I would agree. I would agree that Kansas City needs to improve their defense. I think you're out of your mind if they have to do a whole lot better to be one of the top 2 teams in the NFL. The Colts played a really good game. Part of why they lost was because Kansas City cut Justin Houston, and he was pissed about it apparently because he was a game wrecker, and they just had a really bad game. Pat Mahomes looked terrible, but I don't. Indianapolis is a good team. I don't think Kansas City needs to do a whole lot going forward. This was a bad game for them. I'm not looking at it going like they will get healthier. It's like they're on a rotation and they pick different receivers. And this week the receivers were bad because it was.
This week it was Byron Pringle.
Every week it seems to be a different name.
Yeah, and it's like when the guy's finally not that great, they lose. Like
Yeah.
But like Mahomes kind of got his ankle tweaked and. Watkins, but if you're watching them and you're going, they need to do a whole lot different. There's no way, dude. They're so good. They got caught. The Colts are a good team. I don't think there's anything there to be too worried about.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm not so worried about it per se, but I'm saying though there is wrinkles.
They get exposed and they can get exposed.
Yeah, I mean, I think any team in the NFL can get exposed. I'd still want Kansas City's weapons, and I mean, I think their biggest thing is their defense. Their defense. They paid for all those parts and cut guys like Houston who.
So he's actually just straight up off the team. He got cut.
Well, he's on.
They let him go so that he could. He wanted.
They got rid of him and the other guy when they to get Frank Clark and other guys.
Right.
And Frank Clark's done nothing, and Houston's been really good for the Colts.
And they traded a first round pick for Clark.
Yeah. So. Kansas City has plenty of weapons. Those defensive players have to start playing up to snuff. That I totally agree with you on. The offense, I think they'll just bear down and keep doing what they're doing and go, we had a bad week. You're always going to have a bad week.
I was just surprised at how much Travis Kelce was not involved more in the game plan of this week's offense.
10 targets.
Yeah, 4 catches, 70 yards. I know he still had a decent amount of targets, but I expected bigger numbers for him, especially with the Colts having troubles matching up with tight ends historically. Across the field. So
when Watkins and Hill are out, it's a lot easier for defenses to adjust. I was to get back on the Kansas City defensive side. I've been kind of let down by Tyrann Mathieu. I thought that was a big signing.
Yeah.
And he had one key play or whatever this.
Yeah,
this
the
game,
interception.
But it was outside of that. He's
him
not,
and Frank. I mean Frank Clark has no sacks. You gave him up a first round pick for that.
Little disappointing. Yeah. Mahomes, how he recovers with his ankle and how long this becomes dinged, everything will determine a lot with the Chiefs for the future. But Colts looks promising. That was a big win.
We said it
where they don't think about luck going forward anymore.
I think it's one of those things we said a couple times. If you build your team right, you could if your quarterback retires randomly, if your team's built right, you'll still be pretty good. You might not be as good as you would have been with a prime Andrew Luck healthy. But you're still a good team, and your defense, your defense is still really good. Your offensive line is still really good. Marlon Mack, like you said, had a really good game. I do want them to have some development in the receiving corps, similar to some other teams where you don't want your leading receiver to be what?
Nyheim Hines.
Nyheim Hines? No, that's not what I want. Like where's Paris Campbell out of the draft? Where's T.Y. Hilton? Those things are all things I'm hoping get developed in the future for them. But their team's built really well. Similar, I say this: the Colts and the Cowboys remind each other because they're built the same way with really good linebackers, a pretty good secondary, and a really good offensive line.
Yeah, I'm not worried about T.Y. Hilton in the long term, but yeah, the Colts need another weapon as far as that passing offense. That'll be a differentiator. Eric Ebron's sort of fallen off a cliff this year early on here.
So is Jack Doyle though. They got to figure out that tight end stuff.
Well, yeah, he got smashed.
Yeah, he actually did play in this game but yeah, I think between everything that's encompassing between Ebron, Doyle, Paris Campbell needs to take development. You see Scary Terry doing what he does down in Washington. You're saying, well, where are you showing up here, Paris, to make the difference here? He did have the touchdown, I think it was like 2 weeks ago.
That was his only reception in that game.
Yeah, and the only reception in that game. The frustrating thing for me as a fan, it's ties to any given Sunday. How do you go beat the Chiefs on the road, but then lose at home the previous week to the Raiders in a game you should have won? So, just my 2 cents. But how the Colts are looking moving forward is definitely a positive sign. And hey, we're going to compete to win the AFC South, I think.
And that's the whole thing is we talked about this a little bit. You're going to have to find out later, similar to Dak for the Cowboys. You're going to have to figure out what is Jacoby Brissett worth and where can he get us? Because for Andrew Luck, for better or worse, he could get you, I think we can all assume at some point he could get them over the proverbial mountain. Like he would have been a Super Bowl level quarterback. Jacoby Brissett is playing well, but there's nowhere to think right now with his play that they're a team like you agreed. The South is well within their grasp, even with some stuff going the right way. AFC Championship game, he doesn't seem like the guy to get them over the edge unless he shows more. And they already paid him a little bit, so see if he can.
As Colts fans are recovering from the feeling of Andrew Luck retiring, it feels like Browns fans are starting to fall into that feeling again after having an inkling of hope.
Yo, why did we decide to root for the Browns?
This is why.
They looked like they were going to be good.
We are all secretly sadomasochists that are wanting to feel this in our football lives. This is rough. This is rough. Imagine being a fan of the Browns for a lifetime and having this feeling every year.
They have so many issues. They have so many issues. And they're issues that with a good training camp shouldn't have existed. Like, I won't even get into the stat lines. They're the most undisciplined team I've ever seen. And they're like, oh, they got issues here and here. On defense, they have just so many weapons. And offense, they have so many weapons. They just didn't acknowledge the places where they needed help at all.
Is it coaching?
Yes, I definitely think it's coaching. I don't think they were a good coach before this, so I think they came into a super undisciplined situation, and then you give them Freddie Kitchens, who's not going to force discipline, so they're just even more undisciplined. They're like leading the NFL like by far and away in penalties and penalty yards, and it's stupid penalties. And then you do it into the stat lines. Yo, Baker Mayfield is terrible. Wow. Like, he might not be terrible, like, in general, like, he might be okay. But that game, 8 for 22 for 100 yards and 2 interceptions is one of the worst stat lines.
Fumbles.
Yes, is one of the worst stat lines I've ever seen. And those fumbles specifically were stuff that we've been saying for a while where he's trying to do this college stuff.
Yep.
And he's getting caught and stripped. And it's like, stop doing it. And it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. And to be surrounded with so much. I mean, Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham, maybe two of the best receivers in the game right now. And
he's just missing them. He's just missing them.
I mean, yeah, it's...
For them to start the game and have plays that look like they're designed to get Odell implemented into the game from the get-go, and to have the performance that he did in that game, it's baffling because it means your coaching staff is not in tune with what your offense needs to be doing. And for Odell to be crapping the bed a couple of weeks now, this is for what you're paying to get, this is not appropriate.
I agree with you, but yo, Baker can't get him the ball.
Yeah.
Everything is high. Everything is out of reach. It's terrible.
For how good he looked last year throwing-wise, something happened.
Every throw is over his head. And the thing, too, is from Odell's perspective, the first couple weeks when he had good games, there were like catches where he was just getting laid out because everything was over his head.
Yeah.
And it was brutal. So it's one of those things where you kind of start getting, Tyrannosaurus Rex arms where you're not going for the ball because it's so high that you're just like, I'm going to take another shot to the midsection. It's crazy. And in Baker's defense, I'm doing air quotes on a podcast. That offensive line is I've never seen an offensive line that's so good at run blocking and so bad at pass blocking. Yeah. It's like weird.
Yeah.
They're not that they're a great pass blocking team, but like you see with Chubb, like they're a pretty good run blocking team. They're terrible at pass advantage.
Just run the ball more, do more play action.
And the problem too is even if they were good at establishing a pocket for Baker, he'd be out of it in a half a second anyway.
Do you know how many times in that game I counted where Chubb or Hilliard would step up and pick up the blitz, and Baker would step up he would step up into the side that they blocked him to. So it's like if I step up and block you and turn you, or if you're coming in here and I'm pushing you like that, like to the side, he's stepping up into the wrong side.
So
he's getting tackled still. I'm like, they picked up the blitz, but you went to the wrong side.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. Or like they're a lot of speed rushers because they were playing against a couple of really good speed rushers. They're going to take a wide swing. The tackle's going to force him out, and you're going to step up and around. Yep. It's Aaron Rodgers' career move. Yeah. Every time Baker's stepping up and around them, and they're coming off the block again. I'm just like, this is all college-level stuff that you can't do in the NFL. He needs to correct it because it's causing him to go 8 for 22, leave all his receivers out to dry, and it just looks horrible.
Interesting statistic is that Odell Beckham only threw for 80 yards less than Baker did.
Yes. He led their team in passing for a while and rushing for a while. Like at one point he led in passing, receiving, and rushing, I think. The 49ers, what do you think of the 49ers, though?
So I've been curiously cautious about their offensive weapons other than Kittle.
Yeah.
I still am somewhat, but Breda looked good.
Yeah, Breda looks good. Garoppolo, I still am pretty confused about.
I just don't know.
I don't know what he is.
I mean, they ran for like 250 yards.
That
That running offense, and I don't know if it was because the Browns couldn't stop the run. That's a lot of yards.
Yeah, and in their the Browns should be able to stop the run. They have a lot of injuries, but Myles Garrett wants to be Defensive Player of the Year, and Olivier Vernon is a high-end talent. Sheldon Richardson's good. Schobbert's good. They have so many players on this Browns team.
I still don't understand that trade of this offseason, trading Zeitler away to the Giants for Olivier Vernon. Zeitler was one of the best right guards in the league, and when you have questions now in your offensive line from great run blocking to horrible pass blocking, Zeitler was there last year and looked pretty good as far as that entire offensive line goes. I think the other interesting thing is, going back to the Browns, is that they are the most penalized team in the NFL. They're averaging about 15 penalties a game on the Browns' entire team.
Is that right? That can't be right.
I
know they lead the league, but
I know they lead the league. I believe I saw the stat on ESPN that was like 15 penalties per game.
Jeez.
And no discipline from the top to the bottom. I don't know how Kitchens survives after 1 year.
I'm pretty sure that number's closer to 10 or 11. 15 is insane.
I thought I heard 15. I could be wrong. Somebody check it. But overall, though, when you're just looking at all the weapons, what the expectations were for that team, how many analysts predicted them to win the AFC North at the beginning?
I think it was
close to that.
I would still take them, actually. I know it sounds ridiculous.
Really?
I mean, it's between them and the Ravens.
Yeah, it's between them and the Ravens. The Ravens look shaky, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not this shaky.
Not that shaky.
For a team that lacks that much discipline, on the other side, the Niners did not look like they lacked discipline on defense. Their defense looks scary.
That front seven, wow.
Yeah.
This might be the Chicago Bears-ish type scenario with a slightly better offense. It feels like it, kind of.
Still undefeated. 49ers. No one expected it.
Yeah, that defensive line's good. I think that they got boosted by how bad the Browns played a little bit. I mean, Richard Sherman's still really good. That defensive line's still really good. So they're one of those teams where I think it's the same thing. I'd be intrigued to see them play better and better teams because I don't know how good they are. I don't know. Bosa looked like a game wrecker. Just like that guy's going to be Defensive Player of the Year. And he's not that good. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. The sky's the limit for them, but I still think they're like one of those teams that's like a couple years out of being like the perfect version of themselves. And they do still need to figure out receiver to some degree because they don't know what they're doing at receiver.
They have George Kittle, and that's...
Yeah, and their running game, they have, like, Breda's a good back, a serviceable back, and they got Coleman back, which is nice.
Yeah.
So their running game is good. They just don't have a deep threat. And then there's the question of, even if they had one, if Pettis was, that, could Garoppolo get in the ball? So despite how good their defense is, I still have questions whether or not,
Debo Samuel.
Yeah, I mean, he's
on the block.
If Debo Samuel could be your slot receiver or your number 2, I'd be stoked on that.
Correction, it's 10 penalties.
Yeah, that's what I thought. There's no way a team average 15.
9.6, but they have 48 penalties and 423 yards penalized so far this
15
year.
a game.
10 is still...
It's really high, but it's within the range of other teams. If you were averaging 15
like
penalties
Raiders
a game,
level.
you'd be losing every game. Your coach would be fired immediately. That's crazy.
And that's what the Browns should do.
And yeah, it's pretty close. Yeah, and then getting into the coaching, Kitchens. Yeah, I mean, a Shanahan, I don't love it. They made him look like a genius in this game. That he looked like 31-3. There's no way.
It's the defense. The defense did it. It was all about the defense. The turnovers were happening when the Browns were about to score. So the game might be slightly disillusioned. Maybe this game should have been 31-14 or 17, But red zone turnovers are the worst feeling and change game's perception significantly.
I agree with you. I think this entire game, and I know it's tough to put on any one player, whether your defense plays a little bit better, whether your offense plays, I really think a lot of this game boiled down to Baker Mayfield. He was horrible.
100 yards.
100 yards, 8 for 22.
That's really low.
Do you know how hard it is to win the NFL if you have no passing game whatsoever? You're going to score about 3 points. You know what I mean?
And here we are.
And it was horrible. I'm watching it with my dad. I'm just, man, that throw is terrible. Man, that throw is terrible. Man, that throw is terrible. Every throw was just super off the mark. And if he wasn't on a throw off the mark, he was scrambling into pressure, or he was stepping out of the pocket with happy feet way too quick. So that was one of those games where you go, next week, he's either got to turn it around or he's a bust. Like, it's going to be that quick on Baker. Like, he's either going to be able to right the ship or they got to start thinking about.
Great headlines for Colin Cowherd, though. I'll tell you that much.
I'm excited to see what happens in the following weeks. Thank you guys for the cash this past week. Any topics you guys wanted to kind of discuss last bits?
The only thing I can't get over the refs. I just can't get that out of my mind. The one thing, like football, we were talking before how fun it is, and this year has been full of great storylines. The one storyline that really kills me is how poorly the refs are doing. And it seems like the focus has been on the last couple of years, like the refs, and give them all the tools to succeed and let them be better. And they get worse every year. They blew the one call in the Saints game a couple weeks ago where they called an incomplete pass on a clear fumble, so it negated the return. So basically, they get the fumble, but they don't get the touchdown. The Saints end up losing, even though on that play they should have got a touchdown. Totally swung the momentum. So now on every single short incomplete pass or hit incomplete pass, they just let it play out.
Yeah.
And it's like someone's going to get hurt. It's awful for the game because you're like, oh, is something happening? No, it's not really happening.
Yeah.
They're just letting every single play
But they celebrate and they still let,
Yeah, and it's just, do your job, man. And games are still just officiated really poorly.
Yeah.
There's so many ticky-tack calls. We were talking before. The challenging pass interference thing, they're kind of towing the line. I appreciate it, but it's because they're calling pass interference so inconsistently that there are like so many people are still trying to challenge. Because they're like, oh, you've been calling this, so I'm going to challenge it because with a review, you should. And
right.
Like, no,
there
it's
was
not.
One offensive penalty or offensive interference penalty or something that occurred, and it was definitely that. And then they reviewed it, and they were like, no, it stands. It's fine.
Yeah, I think it has to be like to the level of what the Rams Saints one was where they screwed up and missed it there. I think it's going to have to be so egregious that they don't have a choice.
They've only overturned one, and I'm okay with that being that level.
Yeah.
I just wish if you remove that level out, they would just be better and more consistent in general.
Not afraid to make calls. I mean, at the Eagles game, there was a play where I swear it was like Wentz was tackled and he was getting up, and one of the defensive players knocked the ball out of his hand, and they just called it a fumble because they're like, well,
let it play out.
Well, we're just let it go. Like he was literally like getting up and knocked it up. And they went to the replay. They're like, this isn't even close.
And it's a perfect example of like Wentz is getting up, the guy knocks it out of the hand, they don't blow it.
Yeah.
Then you have a cavalcade of defensive and offensive linemen running over Carson Wentz, who's trying to stand up, and he's injury-ish prone.
Yeah.
That's where you're gonna get an injury. And
receivers trying to make tackles.
And it's at every level. They're inconsistent with holding calls. They're inconsistent with PI. Don't even get me started on roughing the passer. Because what is roughing the passer at this point? They're out of control.
They're literally saying if you go for the knees now, it's roughing the passer, the legs.
But that always was. If you go low, my issue is the guys, there was...
trying to block a pass and accidentally hitting the head in 50
The
yards.
whole, hand touches their helmet, that's a penalty.
That's ridiculous.
It's crazy. Like, me and we've played at a high... Like,
it's hard to do that.
It's hard to be like, I'm going up to break a pass and I'm losing my hand. Oh, man. Let me pull that back. Like, they're going to get concussions. Yeah, it's not going to be on that unless it's really aggressive. But they're calling it on if I brush your head.
I'm waiting for the quarterback flopper to exist where they go back, they throw it, and then just no matter what, just bounce your head into somebody else who's coming by.
And I mean I do think there's a big degree in like, especially in the NFL, guys don't know how to tackle. They'll show plays where they're like, "There's a helmet," and both guys are. There was one this week where I was like yelling. I forget what game it was. Both guys went in. I think it was Christian McCaffrey. Both guys went in. They're like, is this a helmet to helmet? Both guys were upside down hitting backs. And I'm like, neither one of those guys should be in that position ever.
Remember earlier in the year, too, I think it was last year that they were saying they were going to start calling running backs for lowering their head.
I haven't seen it yet.
Haven't seen it called yet once.
Yeah. Zeke will get called on it. But I agree with you, Ross. I agree with you, Ross. They called a peel back block the other day on a receiver. And I get that they want to call that more if you take advantage of the play. He was just blocking, man. He was just blocking.
At the Colts-Chiefs game, I almost lost my mind when they called pass interference on T.Y. Hilton for the rub route within the 1 yard. They said
that was terrible.
They grabbed him, and you see the defensive player just simply grabbing him.
That was one they should have taken back.
And that's the perfect example of rub routes need to be called more when they're outside of the 2 yard buffer, and they never do. And then that one was well within the 1 yard, and they called it. And I was baffled. This week I saw a screenplay where they called offensive lineman downfield blocking. They were like, he took 1 step beyond the line of scrimmage, and they called downfield blocking. And as a ref, I'm like, how do you mess that up?
You're supposed to have 3
You're the
yards.
line official. You're looking down the line. You see that guy take 1 step. How do you throw that flag? This is the thing is, there's so many basic calls that it shouldn't be. The bigger things, if I was just complaining about those bigger items, I'd be fine. But it's these basic calls where no matter how much you're like, the game moves fast. That's not fast.
Yeah.
This is not what we were expecting from this new rule change. Yeah. These effects happening and how much it's going to
And like we said,
game.
It's so bad that you worry that a guy's going to get hurt. You know what I mean? Like Trev had said, Carson Wentz is a great example of that, where you knock the ball out of his hand when he's getting up, they let the play out, and he's going to get trucked. Yeah. And he's going to roll an ankle or hurt his back or hurt his neck. One of those things where you're standing up and guys run into you in the top of your head. Yeah. He shouldn't have to be worried about that.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it is because these referees are afraid to make calls, and they're leaning on the replay system, and they're just getting it wrong. So hopefully they start getting better, but it's not pointing the right direction.
And I'm tired of hearing the overall presumption of go with the play that was called on the field first when there's. Like, that premonition to me is just that when you set that out there, there's no chance for it to be overturned.
The only way I disagree with you is the concept of whatever. It's like the tie goes to the runner in baseball. If we can't see anything definitive, we'll stick. But I agree with you in the sense that should be the line. There's not. They'll review something, and in certain games they'll be like, we're pretty sure. Yeah. And they'll overturn it, and you're like, no, that's not the rule. Like, the rule is if you can't confirm it. There was a completion this week where they were like, there's no way. Like when they talked to, Gene Stellator, the other guys that were like referees a couple years ago. That's not his name. Stellator, not Stellator. And he's like, there's no way. He's like, the ball's inside. There's no camera view where they can see the ball hit the ground. And they overturned it to incomplete. And it's like, they got to be more consistent with that.
Thanks for listening in, guys.
Sorry, I was
all 3 of you that check in and listen to us. Next week, we're going to have our first surprise guest. Who's it gonna be?
I don't know.
I actually don't know.
Might be able to ruffle some feathers. So tune in
to find out who.